In the grim darkness of the future, the 41st millennium and later, there is no time for peace. There is only time for war. And so much has been lost, so much gone, erased by diktat, accident, or the sands of time. The greatest shame is that the darkness has overwhelmed the light, and even moments of splendor are forgotten. Now, before we get into the meat and two veg, a word on behalf of our sponsors. Raid Shadow Legends, where you can truly become a legend. It has the most intuitive and easy to learn mechanics, so much so that even I grasp them in seconds. Yeah, even me. But like the best games, it is easy to learn, yet requires skill to master. And it is a wondrous rabbit hole to go down, for it is beautiful, elegant, enticing, and so very Moorish. You can visit Talaria for 2 minutes, 2 hours, or 2 days, entirely at your own convenience. The visuals are sumptuous and sleek, the effects bracing and engaging. The flow, the perfect blend of action-packed and yet permitting time to give you true control of the ebb and flow of the intensely rewarding action. You can dip in and just fight some battles to get your feet wet, or begin epic quests or go dungeon crawling, or even compete in worldwide tournaments against the entire global raid community. In the spectacular set pieces, the Spider Den, Ikrom Golem's Peak, the Almighty Fire Knight, or the Notorious Dragon. In Raid Patch 1.15 coming in May, you will be able to compete in the brand new Arena tournament, earn points according to your tier, and win awesome rewards in the local and global tournaments. Not for the faint-hearted though, I can tell you. A feast for the eye, a banquet for the brain, a definite tickle to the funny bone. With loot, leveling, upgrading, and glory hounding galore, Raid Shadow Legends really does scratch many an itch, fulfill many a need. But most of all, it's just some fantastic fantasy fun. And it's free to play. On mobile, iOS or Android, and PC. The format is up to you. Now, you lucky things, if you go to the video description and click on the special links, then, as a fresh face, you will get a free 100,000 silver, which is oodles, and a free champion, Grumbler, who is not to be missed as a huge freebie. But all this is only available for the next 30 days, so get in there, go on. Oh, and psst, at the tavern you can actually sacrifice champions to make one of your more favoured warriors better. I love it. Raid Shadow Legends. See you there. And yes, I do play. On breaks. It's a lot of fun. Now, back to the story. I still remember it. Our one perfect day. I remember that day. Many do not, for they only recall the horrors that came after. The betrayal, the war. But not me. I remember that day as if it were yesterday. We stood ready at last, all of us in our ranks and columns, as far as the eye could see. It was our day. There would be representatives from the Solar Auxilia, of course, but it was our day. Just this once. The crusade had ground on. We had fought nearly every form of life and death imaginable. We had fought on despite the horrors we faced. Yet we were always victorious. Always. Alinor. This is where it came to a head, where so many of us gathered in one place. One mighty hammer blow, to shake the very heavens. We massed and we attacked. For Alinor had been the capital world of the greatest orc empire we had ever encountered. Its hordes were endless, its world seemingly without number when we began. The fighting was intense, only second to the Rangdan Xenocides, they said. They were right. The Greenskins put up such a fight, it felt like we were fighting for the very destiny of the galaxy. Primarchs took the field on a regular basis, those demigod sons of the Emperor himself, our fathers. Out they would stride like ancient heroes to take on the greatest warriors of the Horde. And there were many, and they were all huge. The Orcs are a race built for war, it seems. They do love it so much. Even when we were crushing them underfoot, they just seemed so, excited. But after months of constant drive, constant battle, constant war, we drove them back to Alinor. There the legions were unleashed in numbers that had never been witnessed before, all led by the Primarchs, who in their turn were all led by the Emperor himself. At the last, the boss of the Orcs was brought to book by the Emperor and Horus in one titanic clash for the future. So powerful was this Orc, this exemplar of their race, that he actually had the Emperor at a disadvantage. But then came the Emperor's greatest son, his most powerful warrior, Horus Lupercal. Horus defended the Emperor, and the two brought the Orc war boss low. When the leader's head was separated from his body, the Orcs as one broke. From there it was a massacre. We hunted them down and cleaned every last one of them off the face of the planet. When the dust settled, many of us expected to instantly embark, and for the great army to be disbanded, shattered and scattered across the galaxy once more. It was what always happened. Victory, then instantly on to the next journey, the next battle, the next war. This time was different. Our officers were instructed to make us all ready for an event the likes had never been seen. We were instructed to repair, repaint and repolish our armor, to get out every last one of our battle honors. Every last one. Each of our pennants and banners were restored and bearers chosen. Below, on the planet Alinor, huge constructors and clearers were reported to have flattened an entire continent, had made it as flat as a board, and then to make glass of its surface. A huge effort, a massive expenditure of resources that were usually so guarded and rationed. We had ideas, of course, but the reality was beyond anything we expected, beyond any of our wildest dreams. The continent had been flattened and glassed, as I said, but a huge edifice had been thrown up. Atop it were the collected Primarchs in all their finest panoply of war, standing in their midst, radiant as the sun itself. He was there. Our Lord, our Master, our King, the Emperor of mankind. We arranged ourselves by chapter, by company, by legion. All of our finest war gear worn. All of our finest support vehicles were prepared, polished and positioned. Our banners groaned with accolades. Our armor was, to a man, festooned with medals and badges and signals of victories, hard-earned, hard-won. Then as one we marched. We paraded as we had never paraded before. Every warrior, every Astartes of every legion present, in line and column as far as the eye could see. Not every legion the Emperor commanded, but most. And every last one of us was honoured by the presence and the glow of our Primarch, standing amongst his brothers, his peers, and all around the figure of the Emperor. On that day he showed us he loved us. He respected us. On that one day, we marched not to war, or battle, or to intimidate. On that one day, we were fated by our lords and our Emperor. We marched as brothers, as Astartes, as the very children of the Emperor. We marched as humanity ascendant. We marched as one. And afterwards, we feasted as one, our lords with us, amongst us. It was the perfect day. To quote, the Adeptus Astartes, the Space Marines. The Emperor's finest, the Space Marines, the Angels of Death, the warriors of the Adeptus Astartes go by many names, and all spell annihilation to the enemies of mankind. Possessed of terrifying speed, strength and resilience, the Space Marines are genetically engineered super soldiers, whose humanity has been sacrificed so that they may unflinchingly stand against those who would see the Imperium fall. They go to war clad in nigh impenetrable armor. They wield devastating weapons such as the bolt rifle, the chainsword, and the onslaught Gatling cannon. They are able to speed into battle in armored tanks and gunships, to drop from the skies on grav chutes and jump packs, or even teleport directly into their enemy's midst. Coupled with their unshakable resolve, the Adeptus Astartes are the hardest hitting and most tactically flexible warriors in the Imperium. End quote. Welcome, gentle listener. I am Baldermort, your faithful servant, and I wish to introduce you to the forces and factions of the Warhammer 40k setting. Today, we shall be discussing the most important element of them all, and introducing in brief the Adeptus Astartes, the Space Marines. For Warhammer 40k is fast becoming a global phenomenon, and is ready to make the leap into the very heart of popular culture in a way that few presently grasp. One need only ask an old and loyal Marvel comic fan how they felt about the Avengers movie to gain an idea. It is coming. But why a description of Alinor, an old hand might say? A rarely heralded scene from the Horus Heresy period. Well, it shows scope. What Warhammer 40k is all about. Size, passion, and all a bit OTT. But for the Adeptus Astartes, the Space Marines, it was their highest point. The greatest glory. The parade of endless legions of Astartes, of millions of solar auxilia, on the flattened fields of Alinor. It was the time that more of them gathered in one place than before the advent of the crusade. It was the brightest moment in the history of the Imperium. But now that the scene is set, the palate hopefully wet, it behooves me to quickly run through the very basics of what a Space Marine is, hence this video. As such, for the basics, let us lean on existing wisdom. To quote, the Emperor's finest. The Space Marines are numbered amongst the most elite warriors in the Imperium, created by the Emperor himself from the genetic material of the demigod Primaris. The Adeptus Astartes are both more and less than human. Fearless, merciless, utterly relentless, they are the ultimate soldiers for a cruel and terrible age. It is by their might and their sacrifice that the horrors of the galaxy are held at bay, and the darkness of everlasting night driven back time and time again. The Space Marines, known collectively as the Adeptus Astartes, are genetically engineered post-human warriors. They are substantially stronger, faster, more resilient and more skillful than the unaugmented humans who make up the bulk of the human race. Their reactions are swifter, their mental capacity is greater, and they can fight for days without food, water or sleep, and experience no notable deterioration in their ability to slaughter the Emperor's foes. Physically taller and broader than a normal human being, Space Marines possess unique additional organs that allow them to survive underwater, or even, for short periods of time, in the cold vacuum of space, that give them the ability to spit acid, to rapidly heal, to enter a state of suspended animation, and many other superhuman abilities besides. Though they have sacrificed their humanity and their chance at a normal life for the privilege, the Space Marines represent the physical and mental pinnacle of mankind turned solely towards the prosecution of the Imperium's ongoing war for survival. Space Marines are armed and armoured with some of the finest wargear that the Imperium can produce. They go to battle clad in power armour, whose ceramite plates are fully enclosed and articulated with servos and fibre bundles that augment the wearer's already prodigious strength. Fed energy from a backpack-borne reactor unit, the suit also incorporates such support systems as hardened voxcoms, visual targeting augmentation, a resilient rebreather to filter out contaminants and toxins, and dispensers that shunt combat stims and pain suppressors into the wearer's bloodstream. Power armor is tough enough to shrug off small arms and even light anti-tank weaponry with ease, and its various marks can be further augmented with numerous subsidiary systems to render the Space Marine even more strategically versatile and deadly. The weapons of the Adeptus Astartes too are terrifyingly potent. Their most iconic armaments fire bolts, self-propelled armored-piercing miniature warheads that detonate deep inside their targets to blow them apart. From the compact sidearm known as the bolt pistol to the bolt gun, the bolt rifle and the brutal heavy bolter, these weapons find broad usage throughout every Space Marine strike force. These are far from their only means of dealing death, however. High-powered firearms ranging from ferocious plasma pistols to heavy weapons no lesser man could lift, roaring chainswords and crackling power fists, energized blades, devastating thunderhammers, and vicious lightning claws. Relic weapons from the dawn of the Imperium, and potent psychic powers wielded by blade-sharp minds. Armored personnel carriers, anti-grav battle tanks, unstoppable combat walkers, and waves of interceptor craft and gunships. Even fleets of fearsome armed spacecraft designed for orbital assault and blockade breaking. All of these and countless other weapons are at the disposal of the Adeptus Astartes, and they use every one of these tools to its absolute maximum potential. 1,000 chapters. Space Marines are organized into compact and largely self-reliant forces called chapters, of which there are approximately 1,000 at large within the Imperium today. Some rule over worlds from towering fortress monasteries, while others ply the stars in crusading fleets of warships. Each consists of roughly 1,000 combat-ready battle brothers, organized into 10 companies, and supported by legions of serfs, servitors, helots, scholars, craftsmen, and the like. Each chapter has its own heraldry, its own warrior culture, and traditions. However, the vast majority conform to the organizational tenets of the Codex Astartes, the hallowed text laid down by the Ultramarines Primarch Reboot Guilliman in the wake of the catastrophic civil war known as the Horus Heresy. Some chapters, such as the Ultramarines and the Imperial Fists, obey the tenets of the Codex Astartes to the letter. Others, like the Space Wolves, the Dark Angels, and the Blood Angels, diverge notably, but nearly all chapters obey at least some of its doctrines and strategic teachings. The Space Marine chapters were not all created at once. Rather, they came into existence by the way of a series of foundings that stretched back to the dawn of the Imperium. The first founding created vast legions intended to prosecute the Great Crusade. After the dire events of the Horus Heresy, those legions that had remained loyal to the Imperium were broken down into chapters, so as to ensure a force as devastating as an entire Space Marine legion could never again threaten the entire human race. The dozens of chapters created at this time were known as the Second Founding, and many still fight proudly on to this day. Subsequent foundings have been carried out using the genetic material known as gene seed of the Primarchs who sired the legions, and so, though they came about far later in the Imperium's history, most modern chapters echo the unique genetic traits of their forebears. The same is true of the mighty Primaris Space Marines, created in secret beneath the surface of Mars by Archmagos Dominus Belisarius Qual, and sent out to reinforce the chapters during the darkest event of modern Imperial history, the opening of the Great Rift. Only war. Space Marines do not fight like conventional armed forces. They hit hard and fast, striking at key strategic targets such as commanders, communication centers, arms caches, shield generators, summoning circles, or whatever else is central to the foe's plans. Broken down into elite strike forces tailored specifically for the task at hand, the Space Marines unleash tightly focused devastation against their opponents, often overrunning the enemy's defenses before their opponent even realizes they are under attack. They sweep aside all opposition, massacre any who stand against them, and withdraw the moment their objective is achieved. By the time the Emperor's enemies grasp the true magnitude of the blow they have suffered, the Space Marines are already assaulting their next target. Space Marines can fight in the most extreme environments imaginable, be it the heart of an active volcano, the toxin-riddled hell of a poisoned world, or even the frozen vacuum of space. It is fortunate for the Imperium that they can, for when the Great Rift tore its way across the heart of the galaxy, a war 10,000 years in the fighting spiraled into something altogether more hellish. The Imperium is assailed as never before, with demonic legions, bloodthirsty renegades, and lunatic cults striking at every single settled planet. Alien empires push ever outwards, their armies battering down the Imperium's defences and overrunning one star system after another. Half of the Emperor's realm has been cut off beyond the rift, left dark and silent as nightmares from the worst imaginings of the human psyche seek to devour it. Without the Space Marines, mankind would already be extinct. Instead, the Adeptus Astartes lead the fight on every front. In the magnificent Indomitus crusade that brought hundreds of planets back into the Imperial fold, as in countless campaigns, sieges, defences, ambushes and headlong assaults, the Space Marines fight on undaunted to save the Emperor's realm. To quote, Ancient Origins. During the age of technology, humanity spread across the galaxy, yet they fell from grace in the most catastrophic fashion imaginable. Sentient technologies and uncontrolled psychic mutation claiming world after world. The long night followed, a dreadful period of degeneration and barbarism. Mankind teetered upon the brink of extinction. Then came the Emperor. From the ashes of the Age of Strife arose a leader, a man who would become known as the Emperor. His origins are unknown, but it was on Terra, the cradle of the human race, that he founded an empire that would span the galaxy. From the outset of his campaigns, the Emperor employed genetically engineered warriors, the earliest precursors of the Space Marines. Meanwhile, in vaults far beneath the surface of Terra, the Emperor began the creation of the next generation of super warriors. These were the Primarchs, 20 extraordinary individuals who would be his generals and conquer tens of thousands of worlds in his name. In the early stages of their development, however, the Emperor's great work was almost undone, with the Primarchs vanished, scattered throughout the galaxy by dark and jealous gods. Reclaiming the galaxy. All was not lost, for the Emperor still had the genetic records of his Primarchs, and from these he created the Space Marine legions. At the head of his legions, the Emperor set out to conquer the galaxy, a mission known as the Great Crusade. World after world was reclaimed, alien oppressors were annihilated, and human civilization once again flourished. During the Great Crusade, the Space Marine legions were, one by one, reunited with their lost Primarchs. The planets on which they had been raised, and which they now dominated, became the Legion's new homes. With the Primarchs at the fore, the power of the Space Marines was at its zenith. Nothing could stand in the way of the Emperor's armies, and the dream of a united galaxy was within his grasp. It was to be undone by treachery. The Great Betrayal. Horus, the greatest of the Primarchs and trusted war master of the Emperor's armies, cast aside his oaths of loyalty and offered fealty to the dark gods of chaos. Fully half of the Primarchs and their legions sided with Horus, plunging the Imperium into a civil war that set the whole galaxy afire. Brother fought brother, and worlds burned. Much of the truth of this bloody age has been lost, obscured by the mists of time, or embellished to the point of myth. The traitorous forces of the rebel War Master drove all before them, until those still loyal to the Master of Mankind stood at bay within the walls of the Emperor's palace upon Terra itself. Blind hate and malice met courage and steel on the blood-slick ramparts of the Emperor's last bastion, as the corrupted Primarchs and their traitor legions were revealed as the abominations they truly were. The forces of darkness pressed in around the guttering flame of humanity. In this desperate hour, the Emperor and his most trusted warriors took the fight to Horus upon his flagship, facing down the traitor in his inner sanctum. Sanguinius, Primarch of the Blood Angel Legion, and once the most trusted of Horus's brothers, was slain by the War Master's own hand. The Emperor himself was cast down, broken and wounded almost unto death, but the Master of Mankind struck Horus with the full fury of his unbridled psychic power, destroying the Primarch utterly and breaking his traitorous legions. The followers of the ruinous power were defeated, but it was victory won at a terrible cost. The Brotherhood of the Primarchs was no more. The Emperor's dream lay in ruins. The conflict with Horus had shattered the Emperor's body. His immortal existence was now sustained by the baroque machineries of the Golden Throne. The galactic empire he had forged was all but destroyed, and the death toll had spiraled beyond comprehension. Countless planets were left as little more than corpse-haunted wastelands, and many renegades and alien races sought to plunder the reeling worlds of the Emperor. The Scouring. Mankind teetered on the brink of annihilation once again. Its stellar realm had weathered the storm of the Horus Heresy, but now stood on the brink of collapse. Without the Emperor's guidance, the greatest leaders and warriors of mankind came to the fore. Reboot Guilliman, Primarch of the Ultima Marines, rallied the Loyalists and, together with his legion, stood as a bulwark against the tide of enemies that sought to deliver the death blow to the Emperor's dominion. Legends tell that Guilliman was everywhere at that time, rallying defenders on one world and leading them to victory before moving on to another. His brother Primarchs too were bastions of strength, Yagatai Khan, Rogel Dawn, Vulcan and Leman Russ, driving their enemies before them with vengeful fury. Though the foe circled like vultures, the Space Marines and the last loyal Primarchs drove them off. And so began the Age of the Imperium. To quote, Making of a Space Marine. It was the Emperor who unlocked the secrets of creating superhumans. Through many trials of alchemy and genetic artifice, he created his masterworks, the Primarchs. The genetic material of those legendary beings still shapes the galaxy, used again and again to create warriors that surpass the physical and mental limitations of the human race. The Space Marines are the elite of the Imperium's armies, and it is said by some that a single member of the Adeptus Astartes upon the battlefield is worth an entire regiment of lesser men. Curators of the Logis Strategos, an obscure branch of the Adeptus Administratum, calculated that during many campaigns, hundreds, if not thousands of foes fall for the loss of a single Space Marine. Yet still the Adeptus Astartes rue such exchanges, for they are few in number, and their enemies beyond count. So it is that every chapter of Space Marines must constantly induct new warriors into its ranks in order to survive. Most chapters have recruited from their homeworld and those nearby since the foundation of their brotherhoods. This explains why so many are based on planets with harsh or deadly environments. The recruitment stock is far stronger, where every day is a struggle to survive. Each chapter has its own trials or tests that a youth must complete to be judged worthy, and many of these are potentially lethal. Trekking across the deadly wilds, hunting monstrous beasts, undergoing trials of strength, endurance, and wits. All of these are common themes and test not only the Astartes' physical and mental prowess, but their sheer will to prevail. Aspirants must always be chosen as youths, before they become too mature to accept the foreign genetic substances that must be implanted within them. These are derived from material known as gene seed, specifically grown organ grafts that turn them into Space Marines. Gene seed implants are organs that work with an aspirant's own body tissues, stimulating natural abilities such as muscle growth, or creating abilities that are wholly new. Organ implantation goes hand in hand with a harsh routine of physical and spiritual training. This is achieved by means of hypnotic suggestion, prolonged meditation, psychological and spiritual testing, and gradual initiation into the rites and traditions of the chapter. It is a long and sometimes fatal process that must be done in the correct order. In this way, a Space Marine is engineered and modified to become stronger, faster, and tougher than any normal human could ever be, able to endure the harshest conditions without concern. Gene seed is a finite resource, for it is a direct delineation of the biomanipulations that created the Primarchs, a biological inheritance that is shared by every Space Marine, past and present. In a very real sense, the blood of the Primarchs flows through each Space Marine's veins. It is a chapter's single most valuable resource, for it alone allows the creation of more Battle Brothers. And though the science of its creation has been lost, the rituals that allow for its use in creating new Space Marines endure. Primaris Space Marines. Nearly every Space Marine created since the first founding possesses 19 specialized organs derived from their gene seed. The Primaris Marines, originally engineered by Archmagos Call on the orders of Reboot Guilliman, have 3 more. It was the Sang Primus Portum, a device containing potent genetic material harvested from the Primarchs, that allowed for this breakthrough. Entrusted to Call shortly after the second founding, this device resulted in a new breed of Adeptus Astartes that were deployed en masse during the Ultima Founding. Though some chapters were initially resistant or mistrustful of these newcomers, they have swiftly become a mainstay of many. Space Marine Organs. Secondary Heart. The Maintainer. Boosts blood supply, maintains life functions if primary heart destroyed. Osmodular. The Iron Heart. Strengthens bones, fuses ribs. Biscopia. The Forge of Strength. Releases hormones that massively increase musculature and growth. Hemistamon. The Blood Maker. Improves blood chemistry. Laramen's Organ. The Healer. Enables hyper-rapid clotting to staunch wounds almost instantly. Catalepsian Node. The Unsleeping. Controls circadian rhythms, ensures peak performance without sleep. Omophagia. The Remembrancer. Affects partial memory transfer from consumed flesh and genetic material. Multilung. The Imbiber. Breathes toxic air, water, etc. Oculobe. The Eye of Vengeance. Sharper eyesight and enhanced low-light vision. Lyman's Ear. The Sentinel. Filters sound, enhances balance. Suzanne Membrane. The Hibernator. Allows voluntary state of hibernation. Melanchrome. The Skin Shield. Releases photochromatic skin pigments to protect against radiation. Ulitic Kidney. The Purifier. Detoxification Organ. Neuroglottis. The Devourer. Enhances taste and smell to detect trace toxins, nutrients, etc. Mucranoid. The Weaver. Secretes a waxy substance onto the skin to seal against extreme temperatures and vacuum. The Betcher's Gland. The Poison Bite. Modified salivary gland, producing acid poison. Progenoids. The Gene Seed. 2 glands, one in the neck, one in the chest. When extracted and cultured, produces new organs. Interface. The Black Carapace. Subcutaneous uplink to neural controls of power armor and Terminator armor. Sinew Coils. The Steel Within. Durametallic coil cables woven into sinews to hugely increase strength and durability. Magnificent. The Amplifier. Increases growth, enhances functions of other organs, especially Biscopia and Osmodular. Belisarian Furnace. The Revitalizer. Dormant Gland. When triggered, produces hyper-cocktail of combat stims and enhanced rapid flesh regrowth before falling dormant again. To quote, Beyond the Ultima Founding. The Ultima Founding was the largest mobilization of newly created Adeptus Astartes in centuries. It saw thousands of Primaris Space Marines woken from stasis beneath the surface of Mars and hurled into the forefront of mankind's galactic war. Yet this was not the only route by which the Primaris Battle Brothers joined the fight for the Emperor's realm. The Awoken. The first Primaris Space Marines to march to war were those from Archmagos Belisarius Call's laboratories on Mars. Upon Reboot Guilliman's belated return to Terra, the risen Primarch ordered the fruits of Cole's long labour unleashed. This initial wave of Primaris Space Marines emerged from stasis fully psychologically indoctrinated to each fulfill a single strategic role. Some were intercessors, some aggressors, and so forth. and almost all specialized only in that one area of combat. These warriors were able to immediately take up their frontline combat duties with the expertise of veterans, and all possessed a modicum of additional skill with machine spirits thanks to their Martian heritage. Yet ultimately, they were somewhat strategically inflexible, for they had not undergone the grueling progression through their chapters' companies or gained the wealth of experience that progress bestowed. Some of these Martian Primaris formed entirely new chapters, such as the Rift Stalkers or the Silver Templars. The rest joined the Indomitus Crusade as Grey Shields, fighting together with the scions of each chapter until the Crusade fleets reached their adoptive home world, or fleet. Each time such a momentous occasion came, another cadre of battle brothers would peel off and reinforce the chapter whose colours they wore and whose genetic heritage they shared. Not all of these Primaris reinforcements had an easy time integrating with their erstwhile brothers, but ultimately all brought fresh strength to the Space Marine chapters fighting furiously against the tides of horrors vomited from that great rift. The Indoctrinated. The first wave of Primaris Space Marines proved invaluable reinforcements for their parent chapters, yet in the ongoing war for humanity's survival, a single influx of fresh strength would never be enough. This is why, along with the warriors, the Indomitus Crusade fleets included biologous generator acolytes who integrated themselves with each chapter's apothecarian. It was these acolytes and their arcane machines that enabled the Adeptus Astartes to recruit and train new Primaris Space Marines. Not every chapter welcomed these new arrivals. The Adeptus Mechanicus is an acquisitive and controlling organization known to be unscrupulous in its pursuit of power. Chapters such as the Dark Angels, the Space Wolves, and the Mortificators, all notoriously insular of culture, and some guard dark secrets they would risk much to keep out of their manipulative tech priests' databanks. However, none could deny that being able to recruit and train fresh waves of Primaris Space Marines provided the Adeptus Astartes with a long-term sustainable wellspring of martial might. So the process began. Some chapters implanted all of their aspirants with the full suite of Primaris organs, while others gifted only a proportion of their novitiates in this fashion. These newly conditioned battle brothers benefited not only from the strength of their Primaris enhancement, but also from the tactical versatility imparted by full and rounded progression through the ranks. Coupled with all of the cultural and spiritual indoctrination required to properly initiate the neophytes into their chapter. The Ascended. The warriors of the Ultima Founding had joined their parent chapters. The machineries developed by Belisarius Core had provided those chapters with waves of new Primaris recruits, who had integrated into every level of the chapter's organization. For the Primaris chapters, this was an end to the matter. They stood proudly as defenders of the Imperium, recruiting from their own conquered fiefdoms, and forging their own rolls of honor as the years passed. Yet for those chapters who had come before, questions remained to be answered. Could a Space Marine who had not been created Primaris undergo the necessary gene therapies and invasive surgeries required to elevate him to that status? Could he gain the benefit of the enhanced Primaris physique and access the potent war gear that was theirs to wield? In short, could he cost the Rubicon Primaris to become a far greater living weapon in the Emperor's service? Or would attempts to do so simply waste priceless Astartes' lives at a time when the Imperium could ill afford the sacrifice its greatest defenders? Records differ as to who were the first Space Marines to take the perilous leap of faith. Some say it was Marneus Calgar of the Ultramarines, or that it was Corsaro Khan, the White Scar's ferocious master of the hunt, who first made the transition. Other chapters make their own claims, or else lament the tragic loss of those who tried and failed to ascend. Yet despite the losses suffered, and the unspeakable agonies of undertaking the Primaris ascension, more battle brothers cross the Rubicon with every passing day. End quote. Daily life is hard for a Space Marine. I will get into that in more detail at a later date. But bolter drill, fighting cages and sparring, eating, weapon prep, a Marine is never permitted much time to himself. Idle hands and all that, I guess. There are only about 2 hours that they get to themselves each day, if that, and this is only when not in a war zone. Each battle barge is also equipped with complex arrangements of movable walls, adjustable terrain, so Marines are constantly on drills while on ships going from one zone to another. Their razor edge is never permitted to dull. They literally gain no respite at all. Hence mental as well as physical endurance are signs of the absolute fanaticism and unbreakable will of the Marines. But times change, and even the Space Marines have begun to alter to meet the threat of an ever-increasingly grim and dark galaxy. I shall go into much more detail on near every aspect of these warriors in the future, but let us now sum up, as this is only an introduction to the Space Marines after all. Without the Space Marines, there would be no crusade, no Imperium. Without their constant vigilance for 10,000 years, the dream would be dead. Like a life support machine that keeps a body alive. Like antibodies that simply refuse to stop fighting as hard as they can. Without the gene seed, the training, the martial skill, the power armor, the chainswords, the Terminator armor, drop pods, battle barges, land raiders, stormhawks and ravens. And without blessed Bolter, there would be no Space Marines in anything but name. They can seem callous, detached and aloof. This can be seen as a weakness, but it can also be a strength, one born of both pragmatism and necessity. For each Marine is not some mythical knight or laser sword wielding mystic meditating on the meaning of their navel. No. The Space Marines know very well that they are soldiers. They are soldiers of light, if you're a human, but they are realists. When one gets past all of the childish dreams of valor and honor and chivalry, so extant in science fiction, this is why the grim darkness is different. Despite its hilariously over-the-top proportions, it is at its core an anarchistic look at the reality of what a warrior caste would need to do to survive in a world as horrifying, as brutal, as unrelenting and as dangerous as the grim darkness of the Warhammer 40k universe. The regime is an authoritarian nightmare, and its warriors unshakable and pitiless. They are implacable, indefatigable, because they have to be. Every engagement is a calculation, as if weighing up the scales. Every single time they deploy, it must be a necessity, not a nicety, for there are so very few of them. Our modern-day myrmidons, but so very, very few. For they can be drawn into traps, can be ground down through attrition. The cold truth of it is that Marines are only deployed, unleashed, when there is no other choice. For if they are wasted, if they are frittered, if they are sacrificed for ethics or a moral code, then there will be none left when the vilest of predators come knocking on the very doors of the Imperium. The Tyranids, the Necrons, the Orc, the Psychers, the power of chaos, all seek to enslave and destroy humanity. And only they, only the Emperor's Angels of Death, his Space Marines, can truly hold the mighty to account. Only they. It is the Space Marines, the Adeptus Astartes, who won and then held the Milky Way galaxy for humanity. Perhaps it will be the Primaris Marines, their genetic and spiritual progeny, who will either finish the job and bring peace to the grim darkness of the future, or its final demise. For none yet know what these Marines will do. Will they be the continuation of an unmatched martial tradition that literally saved humanity from extinction? Or are they in fact the first step into the final doom of humanity, be it to Chaos, Tyranid, or Necrons, or Orcs? Only time will tell for the final result, but just know that you, yes you, can help decide that future. Every time you field your force, every time you draw up your list, paint a squad, a tank, or HQ, every time you go to your club or friendly neighborhood gaming store, every time you roll the dice and move a model, you do so for the ongoing existence of humanity, for our very survival. So fight! Fight hard, fight long, and never, ever surrender. In your hands may lay the keys to a brighter future. A world without fear, without tyranny, without war, without pain. For this is the only reason the Marines were created by the Emperor. His soldiers of light against an ever-encroaching darkness. Be not a candle, but a raging fire, and do not go gentle into that good night. For if you fail, then on the day that a last Space Marine falls to his knees, his body covered in the blood of his enemies and of his own veins, the wounds at last too much to bear, the burden too heavy. On the day that Marine topples forward into the dust, his last breath escaping his body, his eyes glazing, his heart's beat stop. On that day, all hope is gone. All light snuffed out. So fight! I have been Baldermort, your faithful servant. I hope you have enjoyed this brief introduction to the Space Marines, the Adeptus Astartes. A special thanks to our sponsors, who keep the lights on, but also might help improve things a little around here. Please be aware that we are going to be covering many elements of the Space Marines in much more detail. This is, after all, just an introduction. Now, no matter what you do today, do try to make some time for fun. Toodaloo.